the reality is that as long as we all feel like we're winning on whatever the metrics is, look how many people came, we get filled, there's a euphoria from that, and then we just got to make sure we get to the next one.
Oh yeah, that's the cycle.
Right,
that's the
cycle.
hype. What we call the hype cycle.
Right, and so you keep on doing that, and you have to do that at whatever cost, and then we have to feed the beast. And yet, discipleship's not happening. People aren't getting deeper with Jesus. There's massive burnout. Leaders are not thriving. Right? They're not. And the church actually is not really growing. You actually have just a lot of transfer growth. Hey, what's up, family? And welcome to the Future is Here podcast, where we discuss leadership principles that you need to lead this next generation. I know it's been a minute. I'm your co-host, Tommy Nixon. We're switching some things up this year, which I'm really, really excited about. And my co-host for this is our illustrious COO, CFO. You got any other C's?
Oh man, illustrious. No. I don't know if I can live up to that, brother.
So this is Robert Aboites, man, and he's been with UIWA for a long time and really kind of like the genius behind a lot of things we do here. So super excited to have you joining me on this. We could do this thing together, man.
Yeah, man, excited to be here. We've been talking about doing something like this for, a long time, brother.
Long time.
We have had a lot of leadership conversations, you and I. People listening in going, oh, y'all should record that.
Yeah, so now here we are. We're doing it just for you guys, you know what I mean? And I'm so excited for you guys to hear Robert's voice and get a lot of that wisdom and just to chop it up with my friend here. But really quick, Rob, just give him a little intro, kind of like, what's been your leadership journey up to this point? So, because you've lived some life, brother. Like
just a little. I got the gray hairs to prove it, brother.
You're looking good though, bro.
First of all, man, don't undersell yourself, bro.
Yeah.
I mean, you got some leadership chops.
A little bit.
Come on. We'll get to that though. Yeah, man. Hi, I'm the COO, as you said, for Urban Youth Workers, COO, CFO, really, for the last 10 years, started in 2013 officially. But I've seen UIWI from all of the angles. I've been on the board. I've also been a donor for over 25 years. So
which we appreciate. Amen.
Yeah, still am. But I'm grateful, man. I love this organization. I love our leaders. I love to talk all things leadership. But actually, my journey in leadership started when I was 23 years old, man. I know I'm dating myself, but it started back in 1989. Bro.
Oh, wow.
It's my first actual leadership position. And then from then on, I've held leadership positions in corporate for over like 23 years. But what's interesting about it is I became a believer when I was 26.
Okay.
I was an atheist and then became a believer. And since then, God has just given me these opportunities to lead even in church. And so I've held different positions in church, from ministry leader to elder, executive pastor. So for the last 25 years, I've also been in church leadership.
Yeah, which is also, you're covering, friends, we're covering. He's not saying what the companies were, but can I just say they're big? And huge. And so was, in the corporate world, the church world. So he knows the pain of pastors and church.
Yeah.
He loves the church. Nonprofit management and all that, and we're still rocking in that. And even your son played baseball, so in the sports world, and his son actually went and played in the majors in Mexico, was at ASU, right?
Yeah,
and so so also just like even leadership in that kind of world as well. So super excited, man. So this kind of moving forward for the Futures Here, we're really talking about leadership, and we that's what we are. We're a UIWI, Urban Youth Workers Institute. We're a leadership development organization. And so let me frame this for you guys out there. And Robert's heard this. He can regurgitate all this. But
look, hey, Tommy, I know you, maybe everybody does know you, but do you want to give a little bit of background on you? Because come on, man.
Come on. I know you guys have been following for a while. But okay. So my name's Tommy Nixon, CEO, Urban Youth Workers Institute. I started and ran another organization called Solidarity in 2002. And so I ran that for 16, 17 years. I also planted a church about 10 years ago, stepped down around 3 years ago. That was called One Life City Church in Fullerton, California. And so my leadership journey started, in youth group, honestly. Junior high, they were like, you're a leader. I'm like, okay. Yeah, man. So all right. And so that journey has taken me, all the way to this place here, where even, a lot of you guys going through, deconstruction, and you're wrestling with all this. Felt like I did that 20 years ago. And wrestling was all angsty. And so a lot of what you guys are going to hear from us is like kind of that journey, and what we really think where we're at right now, which I think is a unique time in history. And then how do we need to react as leaders? And what are some of the principles that through our combined experience and what we're seeing in the world and working with a lot of different leaders, both nationally and internationally, what do we think that you need to lead well so that we can reach the next generation for the kingdom,
Absolutely.
for the gospel, for the kingdom of God, to see our world transform, to reach this next generation. And so, the drum I've been banging for a long time, and I want to make sure that you guys all hear this, understand this is how we frame everything. The world is continuing to become young. It's urban. It's multi-ethnic. All the numbers that's just demographics, right? That's not political. It's just what it is, right? So, for instance, in our country, the majority dominant culture, which we're saying white people, become the minority in 2045, but that already happened for those who are 21 and younger in our country right now. Majority people of color. You have that massive shift. 80% of people live in cities in the U.S. Overseas, it's continued to become urbanized. It's something like 41% of the world population is 25 and younger. It's a young world, right? And then you have the reality that 1.2 million young people are leaving the church every year in our country. So really plainly, what we've been doing has not worked. And when we look at the leadership of that, how we got here, where we're at right now, this is what Robert and I are trying to bring to the table, because we have to lead, right, in a different way so that, right, it's not so that we can just sell books and maintain status quo for UIW.
Although that would be nice.
Yeah, it's coming, friends. But but also it's so that the next generation can experience what both Robert and I have with Christ, and to see them take their spot in the kingdom of God. And so for us, we want to make sure that you as leaders understand this, that the landscape is shifted.
Absolutely.
It is, and we're talking like post-pandemic. And so, talk to us a little bit about that, like what you've seen as far as the shift. And I know we even have kind of a model, if you're looking at the church or the institution of Christianity, nonprofits, churches, all that. Like what are we looking at?
Yeah, man. I think the thing about it is all of these statistics, like we've been hearing them for a while. I've been hearing them for a while, but I
knew they were coming.
Yeah, but I think you can see them now.
Yeah.
Especially this next generation, like they're living in these statistics. So although they may just look like numbers to us, this is the reality. I have 4 grandchildren, 5 grandchildren actually now, just had a new one.
Hey.
Yeah, man. So the reality that they're living in is multi-ethnic, multicultural. For them, this is nothing new. This is the what they're going to grow up in. But for a lot of us, especially I'm a Gen Xer, right? Gen Xers, boomers, like we have been seeing this thing coming for a long time. Yeah. And as we said, bro, the future is here. So we do have to lead in a new way in order to reach this next generation. Because let's just be honest, man, what we've been doing hasn't been working.
I think that's the first part of it. You have all these stages of grief, and like part of it is we just got to accept the fact that the landscape has changed. And that what a lot of us gave our lives to, especially, I'm at the very end of Gen X, like what we gave our lives to, some of that stuff just didn't work. And that's painful. And I think we should just acknowledge that's difficult, but it hasn't worked. So once we accept that and we go, okay, we still are alive. Like we're still here. We can be different. We can do something different. Right. So.
Yeah. I think the reality is it hasn't been working for a while.
Yeah.
But the truth is, I don't know how long we're going to beat this dead horse, but pandemic really just exposed a lot of those leadership problems that we were having, right? And so we realized that it didn't happen overnight. So I think the emergence of the mega church over the last 10, 15 years, the pressure to draw people into buildings created sort of this competition for churchgoers to have the best possible Sunday experience. And so really what happened is we just started competing for attention instead of trying to reach the world with the gospel.
Right.
And that's essentially what our, mission is, right? Our commission, the Great Commission, is essentially that, is to share the gospel and take it to the ends of the earth. But I think what happened is, and I saw this actually happening, and it's probably started happening even before I became a believer and went into church leadership, is that we started taking a lot of these leadership principles from the corporate world
Right. Yeah.
and applying them into the kingdom, and particularly in churches. And I think inadvertently what that created, along with this competition to be the biggest and the best, is it really created this kind of like product focused energy to create the biggest and kind of baddest church that you can. And that's where, again, don't want to go into bashing the church, but where we get into all the, the light shows and the smoke shows and sort of this over the top kind of, approach to doing church on Sundays. But in terms of leadership, I think, again, where it started to go sideways is that we just kind of forgot about people.
Yeah.
We forgot that we were supposed to be leading people, and we just kind of focused on building things.
Yeah, products over people, or maybe even better, in the church world, like production over people.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I think that was a Radical Middle episode I just listened to, right? Yeah.
Shout out.
And part of this issue here, I think for me, and what I see is that we sort of confused great orators for great leaders, and they're not the same thing. I mean, there are some amazing orators, some amazing preachers.
Gifted,
I love listening to them. They're super gifted. But I think that we assume that because they can,
gather a lot of people
and share the gospel in really creative ways, that somehow that makes them really great leaders.
Yeah.
But I don't think that necessarily translates.
No, that's good. So there's a couple of things. There's something you said the other day, man, I thought was really interesting. As we think about the shifting landscape and like what the state of leadership today is, when you had, from the Industrial Revolution into factories, into like the 20th century, business world, right? And we talked about Peter Drucker. We talked about, you think about Ford, and actually all these things started shaping our lives, right? And it was a relatively new idea coming from a kind of agrarian society. But as that shaped, and then you got into late 60s, into the 70s, and up to now, you talk about mega churches, church growth movement. So it's like historically, you brought these two things together, and that church growth movement then, which was the birth of mega churches and all that, then that actually shaped current leadership today. And the metrics were set up in a way that it was successful, but was it fruitful? And I think that's what you and I are wrestling with, where we're like, well, okay, so then now, and we're still in that same leadership paradigm. And I think you and I, we've talked about this, and we've kind of coined this, friends. A takeaway for you guys today, is we talk about the great man syndrome.
Yeah.
And there's and because of the historical and just the way the world's been shaped and church growth, and we will recognize God worked through it. Like God works despite us, and things that start out really great, right? It's not a bad idea. Hey, maybe we should get non-believers to know Jesus. Great idea. But then we started worshiping that model. We started idolizing that model instead of, we forgot the why, right? So tell them a little bit about, when we talk about like kind of the great man syndrome, when we look at leadership issues today, like describe that for us.
Well, I think the great man syndrome is this idea that when we're part of any organization, whether that's a nonprofit organization, a business, or a church, that when we place one person at the very, very top, which for us is supposed to be Jesus, right?
Right.
But a lot of times I think we forget that a lot of times, right? When we place one person, that's a lot of responsibility, and that's a huge amount of pressure to put on one person. And I think we've all heard it talked about that, the senior pastor, right?
Yeah.
I don't know why I used air quotes, but the senior pastor is supposed to be, a CEO, a coach, right? A manager, a visionary, a strategist. Like we have this huge expectation on this one individual counselor. Oh man, counselor,
CEO,
shepherd, everything.
Yeah.
And so when we put that much expectation on one person, two things are going to happen. Either one, they're not going to be able to handle it. They're just going to crumble under that kind of pressure.
Which we have all the numbers for that.
Which we're seeing that, Or they're actually going to start to believe it. That they are the great man.
Oh, shoot.
And honestly, it's not really all their fault. Because we, as followers, as congregants, right, even as staff, man, sometimes we prop leaders up and put these huge expectations on them that honestly they probably didn't ask for themselves, but they can't say like, oh no, that's not for me, that's not who I am. They instead just keep taking it and keep trying to build up this
Well, and we spiritualize it.
paradigm.
It's
And
like,
we
well, God
spiritualize
called
it.
me to this. Like I'm the man for this. I'm the right.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because we
Totally.
worship especially in the church, we worship the polished, charismatic leaders, right, that make us feel special and promise us that, God, hey man, God wants you to win at life.
Yeah.
And so we prop those people up, but honestly, it's not the proper expectation. Now, I do want to say something though, because I think it's really important. When we're talking about this, we're not saying that God isn't at work in these things. And
No, yeah,
and,
no.
and you said
Yeah.
sometimes things start off with a really good motive, right? We have good intentions, we have a good heart, and I believe that about all of these leaders in the kingdom. The problem is that when we put these kinds of expectations on our leaders and we start to believe it, we start to feel like that becomes the most important thing in the world, right? That our leadership, that our ability to lead this organization, that our ability to build something that everybody's asking for is the most important. And then you get back to the whole product versus people thing.
Yeah. No, man, that's so good, dude. I mean, it feels like this idea of great man syndrome, if you look at the history of everything, how it's shaped to where it's at today, we know it's not working. And it's not just in the church, right? I mean, this is like nonprofits. This is business. This is, I mean, shoot, even family leadership. Like it's like pretty rampant where it's just not working. And we've had so many leadership books and so many things, right, that are out there to help us be better leaders and stuff. But it feels like it's still all based on this idea and on these kind of like false metrics. You know what I mean? Where it's just like, it's just
butts
about
and seats, gathering people.
Like how many people can you gather? And then if we gather all that, then we can make the money from that. We can do great things and we get right. And I've seen a lot of great things happen from that. But if we're honest, it's just not working. And it's not working for the next generation.
For sure.
So without a doubt, it is not working for the next generation. They don't trust us. They're not into the leadership. They're leaving the church by the millions, right? And they're leaving, in some ways, a life for Christ, a life in Christ. And so I guess really for us, and what we want you guys to walk away with is, well, then what's our answer, right? We can sit here all day and talk about, this guy, they didn't do this and that. But here's what we want to share with you. Our answer to that leadership reality is that we believe instead of one person having the vision and then everybody else around them is there to help that person achieve their vision.
Yeah.
And the reason why it is on us too, as followers and, people that are part of the congregation, is the reality is that as long as we all feel like we're winning on whatever the metrics is, we had a great Christmas, thing. Christmas just happened, like a month or two ago, or we're going to have this great Easter thing. And look how many people came. We get filled. There's a euphoria from that. And then we just got to make sure we get to the next one.
Oh yeah. That's the cycle.
Right.
That's the hype, what we call the hype cycle.
Right. And so you keep on doing that and you have to do that at whatever cost. And then we have to feed the beast. And yet discipleship's not happening. People aren't getting deeper with Jesus. There's massive burnout. Leaders are not thriving. Right. They're not. And the church actually is not really growing. You actually have just a lot of transfer growth.
Right.
So,
in fact, I think some of the statistics are that 50 years ago, we were at 90% of in the United States, people who identified as Christian. I think right now we're at like 64%. And according to Pew Research, if that trend continues, by 2070, we'll be at 35%.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a decline that's happening.
Right.
And so, who holds the responsibility for that? I mean, I think ultimately it's us as leaders, right?
Yeah.
We have to be responsible. We got to own it. Yeah.
But I think there's hope, right?
And absolutely.
This is what we're bringing you guys. So here's the big thing. Here's the takeaway we want from you guys today. We're saying instead of kind of like this great man syndrome, right? And usually it's a man. That's a whole nother episode. But you have instead of doing it like that, and everybody's there to make sure my vision and I get lifted up, and even in my false humility, you know what I mean? You've seen that, like, no, it's not me. But then I got a statue of myself in the lobby. But but here's the answer we want to give to you. So we believe that leadership in a Christian sense, right, in the kingdom of God, leadership really is that I'm here as a leader to help everyone around me become who they were created to be while in the vehicle of
Yeah.
whatever we're doing towards the vision and mission we have, which means as a leader I'm the CEO of Urban Youth Workers Institute. I'm actually here to make sure Robert and Andy, who's over here helping us film this, and all of our staff and our leaders actually are on a trajectory to become who they were created to be.
Yeah.
But I don't do that just willy-nilly, like wherever you're at. I do it because we have a vehicle is UIWI. So if your vehicle is a business, your vehicle is a family, your vehicle is a church, your vehicle is a nonprofit.
That's good. Yeah.
Your job as a leader actually is I'm here and I'm thinking about all these people around me, and I want to make sure that they, in their giftings, who they're created to be, that we're utilizing that, growing those giftings, helping them become who they were created to be, growing in character, integrity, like all the things. But while we're still reaching our vision and mission.
Absolutely.
Like, that's the idea. And now you guys might be sitting there listening to this or watching, and you're like, yeah, that sounds really great. Like, duh. But actually, when you think about it, like, that's not how a lot of these things are built.
Right. In practice, it's very different.
The practice is extremely different than that. Right?
Yeah.
Because again, there's a big difference between me thinking about Robert, thinking about Andy, thinking about our leaders and going, man, who are they? Who are they created to be? Are they in the right place? How am I pouring into that as a means of actually reaching our vision and mission?
Yeah.
It's totally different. Right. And so that's what we want you to walk away with that. But like, let's talk about like, what are the benefits of that? Like,
well, let me take your analogy a step further, right? Because I think that's important. And we talk about this all the time about, the vehicle that God has entrusted you with is very important, clearly. But it would be like basically me caring more about the vehicle than the people in it.
Oof.
Right? So if I'm taking my family on a journey and I'm taking them in the car and I'm so worried about what they're going to do to the car, or what's going to happen in my car, that I don't care about them.
So good.
That's a problem, right? I got to care about the people in the car more than I do about the vehicle.
I'm a little convicted because my oldest daughter started just driving, and I was like, "Hey, her name's Ryan," and I'm like, "Ryan, don't crash the car, okay?" It's because she's driving my car now.
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah.
Don't, and then somebody just goes, or also maybe hope that she's okay once she's driving out there, and I'm like.
Oh yeah.
Well, yeah, there's that, dude. I mean, but it's funny. I got a little convicted, bro. So yeah, you're right.
But sometimes we assume that's a given, right? That, oh yeah, of course I care about it. Well, yeah, but we have to vocalize that stuff, right? Because if we're not vocalizing it, we're not remembering it, to be honest with you. The other thing about it is, I mean, again, we can play this analogy out forever, right? But not only are you to care more about the people in your car and your vehicle than the vehicle, but also about the people outside of your vehicle that you're driving your vehicle. Like, it's not about like, oh, I'm caring for my people and we're going 100 miles an hour. I'm just running over everybody who's in front of me, right? I think there was a pastor at some point that actually said that about running people over with a bus, but we won't get into that.
That's right. That's another podcast.
It was another podcast, but that's right. That's the analogy here, right? Is that this vehicle? Yes, we have to care for it. Obviously, there's good stewardship involved in caring for the vehicle that God has entrusted to you. But you cannot care about that vehicle more than you care about the people in it. And so you're taking these people on a journey. And while you're taking them, you need to be having conversations. You need to be asking how they're doing. You need to be caring about those people. Yeah. And I think part of what we're going to be talking about over the next series of podcasts, right, is exactly how we do that and how we do that well.
Yeah, because it's not a, it's not systematic in the sense like this is step 1, step 2.
It's not a formula,
but it's value-based, which we'll be talking about. And there's a way to actually practice this. And there's a couple benefits of this, friends. Like when you're listening to this and you're thinking about this and you're like, oh, should I keep on listening to this podcast? Here's why. As a leader, if you take this simple paradigm that we have, one, it gets really complex really quick.
Yeah.
Because it's better for your people, but you'll start going, but I can't do that with 10,000 people. That's right, because that's leadership, because it's not all built on you. That means that then you got to do those who are closest to you. You got to build a corporate culture. You got to make policies. There's a whole list of things that you have to do and enact so that more people can be cared for, which the benefits of this then is it's not all on you. Like, it's not all on me. I'm not the Holy Spirit. I can't change all of our leaders, but I can join in with what God's doing in their life. But what happens then, a benefit of this is people are, the loyalty that a lot of these pastors demand, they do it through coercion and manipulation. But when someone knows that I'm actually really for them, guess what? Then they want to give, they want to stick around. But it also makes other harder conversations easier when you're like, hey, I don't think you can grow anymore at this place. Let's bless you out. And it's not one of those like manipulative, like, hey, we want to bless you out, but really you're a problem. And I just want to get rid of you, right? So there's some real practical things to this. But the other huge thing in reaching this next generation is the next generation wants to be mentored. This is actually
I hear that a lot.
What they want. They want someone to stop long enough to go, I care about you. Let me have the hard conversation. And they might be a little, that might be difficult for them. But that if they know and they trust us and it's a safe place, then we can actually speak into their lives, walk with them, and actually help them be who they're created to be. Instead of just complaining about how lazy they are and they don't care about this or that. Okay, well, they're asking for mentorship. We can do that, and we can bring that if you have this kind of paradigm. And so I think that's one of the benefits, man, when I think you start living and doing this way, you'll reach a whole next generation of people, but then we'll also have healthier orgs.
Oh, I mean, dude, we need that.
Robert and I hear horror stories all the time about the type of leadership structures people are in.
We do.
And we're saying, I think this is the answer to that.
And it's not just big organizations, by the way.
Oh, no.
I mean, there are a lot of smaller churches and orgs that have a very unhealthy kind of toxic leadership culture.
Huge.
And that, I don't know, I think that grieves me more than the big organizations, honestly, that have leaders.
Yeah.
Well, because you're closer to it, right? As an individual, as a staff person, if you're one of three, you're closer to that
and
toxicity,
you feel more responsibility
and you feel more responsibility, right?
That's good.
To hold it together. And so, I remember talking to this young leader once, and we were talking about these kinds of things. We were talking about how to kind of lead differently, right? Because one of my biggest things is I love to teach you as a leader to think differently so that you can lead differently, right? Yeah, it's not just, again, we're not trying to be formulaic about this. It's not about a formula. It's about really a process of growing yourself so that you can help others grow as well. But I was talking to this young leader and I was trying to explain all this, and he decided that he didn't want to be part of what we were doing because he felt that was dishonoring to his pastor. He felt like, I can't be part of this. I think you guys, I can't, this feels like very dishonoring. And so he didn't continue with the training, which, I wrestled with that for a long time. That I thought, wow, did I say something wrong? Like, was I being too negative? Was I, I don't remember bashing anybody. Yeah. I mean, I asked all those. I mean, I didn't blame him first. I blamed myself first. Right. I was like, oh man, I must not have,
That's a bonus leadership thing for you guys. Like, but
please blame yourself first, right? Take ownership of whatever happens around you and ask that question first. But as I kind of wrestled through that, I understood his point, and he felt this loyalty to his leadership, and honestly, that wasn't a toxic environment he was in, but it just made me think about the fact that for him, he could not see leading any differently than what was being modeled for him.
Sure, yeah. You don't know what you don't know, right? Yeah.
Right. And I think, you said something earlier that when you're talking about tens of thousands and leading tens of thousands, right? We talk about multiplication, right? Yeah. You have to, not reproduce yourself, because we don't want that, especially if you're toxic. Please don't reproduce yourself.
But like a virus.
Yeah. But how you have to multiply yourself, right? In order to lead others. It's the Moses story with his father-in-law, right? Coming to him and saying, hey, you got to put, it's too much for you. You got to kind of create this leadership structure where others are leading leaders and leading other leaders and then ultimately leading the people. But when I think about that, I think we've even got that part wrong as leaders, because we try to multiply ourselves in style, but not in substance.
Yeah.
Right? Paul said, be imitators of me as I am an imitator of Christ. But I think he was talking about the substance of who he was, not the style. And we have a lot of style imitators, not a lot of substance imitators.
Right. And then ultimately, too, what we're talking about is you're trying to be someone you weren't created to be.
Oh, yeah. And talk about that.
And then you're sitting there going like, oh, how come I don't have a church like this? Or how come my organization like this? It's because you're trying to be that guy or that woman, and that's not you,
right?
And so we're all walking around feeling all failure and shame spiraling because it's like, oh, because these success metrics are messed up, right? And we'll get into that in later episodes, like kind of the theology of all this and where all that comes from. But really, this idea of like when you know who you're created to be and you're helping others do that, and actually helping others is part of that sanctification process and growth process for me.
Sure.
Oh man, it creates these really beautiful movements and organizations and families and businesses and all that. And we're not really experiencing that. You know, you ever hear people talk about quote unquote ministry? They're just like, well, man, you know, it's just ministry. And I'm like, is this really what Jesus had for us? Where it's just we're all kind of heads down and we're just grinding it out. You know, in the urban space, we're always like, man, just grinding. And we're just, you know, but we're trying to sell the abundant life and no one's living it. And this is one of the core benefits, I believe, of this type of leadership paradigm is we can actually live out what we say we believe.
Yeah.
And you as a leader can actually be like, I feel healthy. I'm not saying it's not hard. It's still the narrow path, but there's a sense of like joy. There's a sense of like, I see God working. There's a sense of his yoke is easy and his burden is light. And we all say that, but we don't believe it. And we're not experiencing it. And I think that this kind of leadership paradigm and what we want to help, discuss with you guys and invite you in on is I think we've discovered some things, some values, some ways of being. So,
well, that's the fallacy, though, right? About a light burden is that if it's light, you think you could take on a lot of it.
Oh, yeah.
Which is silly because then it becomes heavy, right?
Yeah, right.
But I also think that one of the things that we want to make sure that we definitely talk about are we're speaking to, let's just be honest.
Yeah.
We're speaking to that next generation of leader.
Yeah, we are.
Right? Yeah. Because, to some extent, the systems and the structures that are in place today, the leadership structure and the system that feeds it, it would be hard for those leaders to make a change. Now, I'm not saying that can't happen. If that's you, hey, join us.
Yeah, jump on in.
Jump
or maybe
on
you're already
this,
leading like
or
this.
Maybe you're already, which is great.
Great.
Yeah, and we should talk about that because there are I know so many really good leaders who are leading in very healthy ways, right? I mean, I serve under some of them. So I love, when leaders are doing it well, we need to celebrate that.
Yeah.
But the reality is that as you said, the machine, right, of the church or even the nonprofit world, man, it just forces you almost, to grind, but you gotta kind of fight against that. I heard somewhere that we should love the Lord, our God, with all our heart, soul, strength, and mind, and then love others as yourself.
Yeah.
And what's funny is that as a leader, I think that's really important. Yep. Like you need to learn to love yourself, not in a weird, cringy way, but in a really healthy way, right? Like you're talking about your own growth is just as important, right? Because if you don't know how to grow, if you don't know how to be discipled, how are you going to teach others to do that?
Right. You can't lead people where you haven't been.
Yeah. If you can't lead yourself well, you can't lead others well.
Yeah.
And so it's really important, I think, for us to kind of, speak to that next generation and say, hey, it's not too late to learn a different leadership paradigm.
Absolutely. And so, hey, we invite you guys in on that, man. Thanks for jumping in on the Futures Here podcast again. Some of you guys have been following this for a long time. Appreciate you guys. I'm really excited about this direction.
I'm excited too, man.
This episode, we just wanted to set it up for you. Like, what I want you to take away is this new leadership paradigm where your job as a leader is to help those around you become who they're created to be through the vehicle towards the vision and mission that God has given you to lead. And some of the time, a lot of you guys aren't going to be maybe the leader at that point. That's okay. We're going to talk about that. How do you lead in an organization, in a church, if you're not the leader? But we want you to have these leadership principles, this value system, this way of being. And we want you to learn and journey with us and speak into it with us as we kind of just express, what we've experienced and what we see in the future. And so we believe you guys are the future and the future is here. And so go ahead, like the podcast, share it, man. Share it with others, subscribe. We would really love for you to continue to journey with us as we talk about this kind of like a new type of leadership for this new reality that we're living in right now. So, man, bless you guys, man. I'm excited to have Robert here.
I'm excited to be here, man, and take our leaders through this journey, brother.
Doing it, man. Okay, so we'll see you guys next time, man, on the Futures Here podcast. Peace.